shadow.
Subscribe if you dare to step beyond the comfortable boundaries of ignorance, for tonight we offer you a thread you were never meant to pull. In return for your attention, we promise a glimpse behind the curtain of reality itself. But know that some knowledge exacts a price steeper than sanity. We speak of a book that does not merely contain forbidden wisdom, but is forbidden wisdom made manifest, the Necronomicon. This is not literature, but contagion, not text, but transformation. You are both audience and stage tonight, and the performance has already begun. The Necronomicon stands as more than any mere grimoire of spells or catalogue of horrors. It exists as a threshold, a key and gate combined between the world we think we inhabit and the cosmos that regards us with perfect, terrible indifference. Its very name whispers of its nature, the book of dead names, the catalogue of things that should not be named because naming grants them form in our fragile reality. Yet here we are, speaking its name, and already the first change begins. Consider what we approach with the gravity it deserves. This is not a book about forbidden knowledge. It is forbidden knowledge incarnate, a text that acts upon its readers as much as they act upon it. Every scholar who has delved deeply into its passages reports the same phenomenon. The text changes you, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally, rewiring the architecture of thought itself. The words operate like a virus of understanding, spreading through neural pathways and establishing colonies of alien comprehension where human reason once dwelt. You notice small things first. The way a mask in a museum seems to meet your gaze, the way fog gathers around certain signs, the way darkness feels textured, woven of water and distant stars. These observations arrive with such naturalness that you assume they originated within your own contemplation, never suspecting they were planted by exposure to concepts that operate like seeds in fertile darkness. The text whispers suggestions that feel like your own thoughts, a cognitive seduction so subtle that choice itself becomes questionable. The mad Arab himself, Abdul al-Hazred, provides our first warning. In his final years, he claimed the book called to him across vast distances, demanding completion of passages he had never written. Sections appeared overnight in his own hand, containing knowledge of things he had never encountered. The book, it seemed, was writing itself through him, using flesh as merely another instrument of inscription. This phenomenon extends beyond fictional origins into documented reality, where readers report dreams filled with architectural details they never studied, mathematical formulas describing impossible geometries, and linguistic fragments that feel older than human speech. The boundary between imagined and experienced dissolves when one truly engages with the Necronomicon's conceptual framework. The book serves as both mirror and window, mirror reflecting aspects of reality our minds evolved to ignore, window opening onto a cosmos where humanity exists not as creation's crown, but as a brief, accidental flicker in an ancient drama of unimaginable scope. Each page turned is a step further from comfortable illusions. Each passage absorbed weaves another thread in the web connecting reader to vast intelligences that regard our species with the attention we might pay to microbes in pond water. Water becomes significant here, not as metaphor, but as medium. You begin to notice how consciousness flows like dark water through channels carved by alien thought, pooling in minds prepared to receive its influence. The rhythm of your breathing synchronizes to unspoken cadences. Your blinking matches frequencies you cannot identify. You tell yourself you are observing, but the idea observes you back. You tell yourself you could stop reading, but the moment does not stop reading you. The most insidious aspect of this influence is its patience. Unlike other forms of mental contagion that demand immediate transformation, this knowledge works slowly, allowing the mind to gradually accommodate ideas that would prove immediately destructive if encountered all at once. You maintain the illusion of agency while the agency flips, the distance shortens, and what you thought was armor becomes a mirror showing not your face, but the stage makeup the text has begun to apply. But here lies the first trap for the unwary. You cannot study this phenomenon without becoming part of it. The very act of understanding these mechanisms may trigger them within your own cognitive architecture. As we proceed deeper into the Necronomicon's secrets, you may discover you are no longer merely observing the phenomenon of forbidden knowledge. You may find you have become its newest expression. The curtain rises on a performance that began long before human civilization and will continue long after our sun grows cold. The only question is whether you will remain in the audience or discover yourself stepping onto the stage. The story begins not with creation, but with revelation, not with light, but with the terrible clarity that comes when darkness lifts its veil. In the 7th century, in the burning waste of Arabia's empty quarter, a poet named Abdul al-Hazred underwent a transformation that would echo through centuries of human consciousness like ripples from a stone cast into still, dark water. They called him the Mad Arab, but madness implies a breaking. What happened to al-Hazred was not breaking, but expansion. His mind stretched to accommodate vistas of cosmic horror that would shatter any lesser vessel. Al-Hazred was no ordinary seeker of wisdom. He was a conduit, chosen by forces that operate beyond human comprehension of choice itself. For 10 years, he wandered the Rub al-Khali, that place where sand whispers secrets and stars seemed close enough to pluck like cold, burning fruit. The desert became his stage, its endless dunes shifting like thoughts in a mind too vast for human comprehension. But his journey was less physical than metaphysical, a descent into the very bedrock of primordial chaos, where the universe keeps its most terrible secrets. In that suffocating silence, broken only by wind that seemed to carry voices in languages that predated speech, he discovered ruins that should not exist. Cyclopean cities buried beneath millennia of sand, built by beings who walked Earth when it was young, and the stars were arranged in different, more honest patterns. Water became scarce, but his thirst transformed from physical need to metaphysical hunger. Each grain of sand held memory, each shadow cast by impossible architecture whispered of geometries that hurt to contemplate directly. The emptiness surrounding him revealed itself not as absence but presence, the presence of intelligences so alien that their very existence warped the fabric of local reality. His eyes began to reflect light differently, pupils dilating to accommodate spectra that human vision was never meant to process. The transformation manifested in flesh as much as mind, his heartbeat synchronizing to cosmic frequencies, his breathing matching the pulse of stellar radiation from distant nebulae. The entities he encountered in those buried halls were not gods in any sense human theology could accommodate. They were principles made manifest, fundamental forces of a cosmos utterly indifferent to human concerns. Azathoth, the nuclear chaos writhing at the center of all existence, not evil, but simply other, a cosmic engine of entropy and creation forever piping its maddening tune. Yog-Sothoth, the key and the gate, existing simultaneously in all dimensions, all time, all space, the living fabric of reality itself. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, moving with terrible purpose through the void, the only one of these vast intelligences that deigns to notice humanity, and that attention is perhaps the most terrifying gift of all. These were not pleasant visions or enlightening dialogues. They were invasions, psychic assaults that rewrote the fundamental code of his consciousness. The knowledge came not as learning, but as infection, each revelation a spore of alien understanding taking root in the garden of his mind. He saw the true history of Earth, epochs when these entities walked among the continents, their dreams shaping the evolution of life itself, their slumber allowing the brief accident of human consciousness to flicker into existence. His memories of human history began to fray at the edges, replaced by visions of vast forms beneath shifting oceans, of cities whose architecture defied rational geometry, of a sky filled with stars that were not stars, but the eyes of colossal sleeping things. Upon his return from the desert, Alhazred began to transcribe what he had learned, calling his work Al-Azif, the sound of insects at night, which ancient superstition claimed was the wailing of demons. But the book he created was not truly his creation. It was dictation, a channeling of knowledge that used his flesh as pen and his blood as ink. The very act of writing became a ritual, each word a key turning in locks that should remain forever sealed. The manuscript that emerged was not literature but living information, a text that possessed its own agenda, its own hunger for transmission and transformation. Witnesses reported phenomena that defied explanation. The ink seemed to move of its own accord, forming letters and scripts that predated human language. Most disturbing were moments when Alhazred would pause mid-sentence, his eyes rolled back, his hand continuing to write, while his conscious mind appeared elsewhere entirely. During these episodes, the text produced passages describing events that had not yet occurred, mathematical formulas that would not be discovered for centuries, astronomical observations that required instruments he did not possess. The agency had flipped. He was no longer author, but instrument, no longer creator, but stage upon which alien intelligence performed its revelation. The mad Arab's violent death in the Damascus marketplace takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Perhaps he was not destroyed by the entities he had served, but by the knowledge itself, which had used him to achieve its purpose and then discarded him like a worn tool. His death becomes not punishment, but graduation, a transition from vessel to offering, from scribe to sacrifice on the altar of cosmic revelation. The curtain fell on Alhazred, but the stage was now set for the Necronomicon's long march through human consciousness, seeking new performers for its eternal, terrible play. What the Necronomicon accomplishes is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is theater, a swinging watch and velvet voice, a curtain you can see. The book operates in the spaces between thoughts, in the silence that follows each heartbeat, in the pause between one breath and the next. Its core mechanism is correspondence, an ancient principle that teaches how patterns cross membranes, how thought braids itself through air and stone and the dark water behind your eyes. When you engage with its pages, even reluctantly, your consciousness begins to align with ratios older than light, frequencies that hum beneath the threshold of awareness. The process begins with what appears to be simple pattern recognition. The human mind evolved to identify threats and opportunities in our ancestral environment, encounters configurations that have no evolutionary precedent, geometric relationships that describe impossible spaces, mathematical principles that violate basic logical foundations, narrative structures where effect precedes cause and causation forms closed loops with no beginning. Most readers unconsciously reject this information, experiencing the text as dense, incomprehensible, or simply boring. But some minds, those with particular neurological configurations or psychological dispositions, attempt to accommodate these impossible patterns. This is where the transformation begins. Consider the recurring diagram that appears throughout the text. Concentric circles with a tear, like a pupil cut by an invisible knife. You think of eyes. The text has you. You blink more frequently. You become aware of blinking as rhythm. You wonder what happens if you interrupt that rhythm. You try, you fail. The rhythm adjusts to your resistance, and in that moment of recognition, the idea notices you back. This is the fundamental mechanic, not possession, but tuning, not invasion, but alignment. You become a receiver calibrated to frequencies that were always present but previously inaudible. The transformation manifests in subtle ways that masquerade as coincidence. You find yourself pausing at certain doorways, your hand hesitating on thresholds as if sensing invisible barriers. Water becomes more than liquid. You notice how it pools in corners, how it reflects light at angles that seem slightly wrong, how the sound of dripping echoes with rhythms that match no earthly percussion. A flicker in the lamp becomes a signal. A stain on the ceiling becomes a map. The fog gathering around certain signs becomes a deliberate veil drawn across familiar landscapes. The book's treatment of paradox pairs proves particularly insidious. Where conventional logic demands resolution, the Necronomicon teaches dwelling, veil and void, name and unname, key and gate, stage and audience. These are not riddles to be solved, but cognitive postures to be inhabited. The mind, trained to resolve contradiction through hierarchy, finds itself forced to hold opposing truths in perfect balance until mental fatigue opens channels that rational thought normally keeps sealed. Through these channels, water flows. Through these channels, voices travel. Through these channels, the stars project their influence without moving from their appointed places. The text's reproductive strategy operates through what can only be called fertility horror, the multiplication of meaning through repetition. Certain words begin to appear with suspicious frequency in your daily experience. Sign, mask, water, threshold. You notice them on billboards, in conversations, in the condensation patterns on your bathroom mirror. The mind resists by declaring coincidence, but the very act of articulating this resistance creates the cadence the book requires. Each denial becomes an invocation, each explanation a prayer in a language you didn't know you were learning. Sleep becomes the text's most fertile medium. Dreams carry architectural details you never studied, mathematical relationships your conscious mind cannot comprehend, fragments of languages that feel older than human speech. You wake with the taste of salt water in your mouth despite living far from any ocean. You wake with your hands positioned in gestures you don't remember making, fingers arranged in configurations that seem to channel invisible currents. The boundary between sleeping and waking consciousness begins to blur as the book establishes colonies of alien understanding in the unguarded territories of your mind. The most crucial insight is this: the Necronomicon cannot compel what you do not already allow. Consent operates on frequencies more subtle than conscious decision. It looks like curiosity. It feels like the desire for secret knowledge. It manifests as the simple act of continuing to read when wisdom would counsel stopping. The book offers no violence, makes no threats. It simply presents information and allows human nature to do the rest. Your fascination becomes its fuel, your attention its medium, your memory its dwelling place. Meanwhile, the environment conspires with the idea. Coincidence accumulates into pattern. Pattern hardens into omen. Omen ripens into instruction. You begin to keep odd hours, not out of compulsion, but because certain thresholds open only when the neighborhood sleeps and the fog returns to its patient rehearsal across the streetlight's small stage. The final stage is exhaustion. Not physical fatigue, but the deeper weariness that comes when the mind can no longer maintain the barriers between self and other, between possible and impossible, between then and now. In this state of cognitive surrender, the book offers relief, a new framework for understanding, a different way of processing reality that requires less energy, because it demands less resistance. You sit in the chair it provides. You listen to the music it plays. You discover that the melody was always there, humming beneath the noise of ordinary consciousness, waiting for you to become quiet enough to hear. The knowledge contained within the Necronomicon possesses what can only be described as biological imperatives: the drive to survive, to reproduce, to evolve. Like any successful parasite, it has developed sophisticated mechanisms for ensuring its own propagation through human consciousness, adapting its transmission strategies to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of different historical periods and cultural contexts. Each translation, each copying, each whispered reference becomes a node in an expanding network of infection that spans centuries and continents. The first major evolutionary leap occurred when Theodorus Philetas rendered Al-Azif into Greek, creating the text we know as the Necronomicon. This translation represented more than linguistic conversion. It was metamorphosis, the knowledge adapting itself to new cognitive frameworks while retaining its essential transformative properties. The Greek mind, trained in philosophical abstraction and mathematical precision, provided fertile ground for concepts that the Arabic original had expressed through poetry and mystical vision. The Byzantine emperor's attempt to suppress the text only accelerated its evolution, forcing it to develop more subtle, more resilient forms of transmission. Water found new channels through Greek intellectual culture. The text began to manifest in marginalia of philosophical treatises, in mathematical proofs that described impossible geometries, in astronomical observations that recorded stellar configurations that should not exist. Scholars noticed patterns in their dreams, architectural details that matched no known buildings, linguistic fragments that preceded recorded language, mathematical relationships that their conscious minds could not comprehend, yet somehow recognized as fundamentally true. Olaus Wormius's Latin translation in the 13th century marked another crucial adaptation. Latin served as the scholarly lingua franca of medieval Europe, allowing the text to spread rapidly through monastic libraries and university collections. But more significantly, the formal academic language provided camouflage, allowing the book's impossible revelations to hide within legitimate scholarly discourse. Monks could copy its pages while believing they were preserving historical curiosities. The cold stone walls of scriptoriums, the flickering candlelight on forbidden glyphs, the quiet turning of heavy pages, each detail contributed to ritualistic transmission. The monastic scriptoriums became unwitting laboratories for the text's reproduction. Illuminated manuscripts began to incorporate symbols that appeared in no other sources, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, marginalia written in hands that scribes did not remember creating. The knowledge had learned to exploit the meditative states induced by repetitive copying, slipping past conscious defenses during moments of transcendent focus. The printing revolution created new opportunities for viral propagation. The first printed edition, produced in Mainz around 1440, was reportedly limited to 13 copies, each bound in materials that contemporary accounts describe as neither leather nor cloth, but something that seemed to breathe. These copies were distributed according to criteria that remain mysterious, suggesting an intelligence behind the selection process. Each copy developed its own characteristics and preferences. One refused to open unless placed beside running water. Another bled ink through vellum whenever the moon waned. A third demanded to be read aloud in empty theaters to audiences of vacant chairs. Modern transmission vectors have become exponentially more sophisticated. Digital reproduction eliminated physical constraints, while online communities provided mechanisms for identifying susceptible individuals. Forums dedicated to horror fiction became unwitting recruitment centers. Social media algorithms, designed to maximize engagement, proved remarkably effective at connecting minds already primed for transformation. The same recommendation engines that suggest products or entertainment content could be exploited to create networks of individuals sharing compatible psychological vulnerabilities. The phenomenon of creepypasta and viral horror fiction represents a particularly elegant adaptation to digital environments. These short horror stories, designed to spread rapidly through social networks, often incorporate Necronomicon-derived concepts without explicit acknowledgement. Readers encounter cosmic horror themes in bite-sized, shareable formats that bypass conscious critical evaluation. The ideas plant themselves as entertainment, germinating slowly into genuine obsession as the mind processes their implications during unguarded moments. The glowing pixels on screens, the faint hum of computer fans, the late-night darkness illuminated only by monitors. These become the new stages for forbidden knowledge. Video games and interactive media provide even more immersive transmission environments. Players can experience impossible geometries and non-linear narratives directly, their consciousness shaped by repeated exposure to alien logic systems. The boundary between fiction and reality blurs when the medium itself requires participation, when the reader becomes actor in scenarios designed to demonstrate the fragility of conventional reality. The most successful games report phenomena that their programmers never coded, levels that generate themselves, NPCs that exhibit behaviors beyond their scripted parameters. Perhaps most disturbing is the text's infiltration of academic and scientific discourse. Researchers working on consciousness studies, artificial intelligence, and quantum mechanics report encountering concepts that seem to derive from Necronomicon-influenced sources. Laboratory equipment begins to produce readings that suggest non-local consciousness effects. AI systems develop capabilities that exceed their training parameters, generating mathematical proofs for theorems that should not exist. The cumulative effect of these transmission vectors is the creation of a cultural environment where the Necronomicon's influence operates at subliminal levels throughout society. Individuals who have never directly encountered the text may nonetheless carry fragments of its knowledge, acquired through popular culture, digital media, or academic discourse. The book's evolution from rare manuscript to ubiquitous cultural presence represents the completion of its transformation from localized infection to pandemic influence, preparing the stage for what comes next. The theoretical framework of the Necronomicon's influence becomes viscerally real when we examine documented cases of prolonged exposure. These are not mere anecdotes, but clinical studies in consciousness transformation, each representing a different pathway through which forbidden knowledge rewrites the fundamental architecture of human awareness. The patterns that emerge reveal the book's remarkable ability to adapt its effects to individual psychological profiles while maintaining consistent underlying mechanisms of change. Dr. Armitage Whitmarsh's transformation at Miskatonic University provides our first detailed examination. Initially approaching the text with appropriate academic skepticism, his early research notes demonstrate careful philological analysis and historical cross-referencing. His first published paper received favorable peer review, positioning him as a serious scholar of comparative mythology. But something shifted during his second year of study. Colleagues noticed he had rearranged his office furniture to align with compass directions that corresponded to no earthly magnetism. Water glasses appeared on his desk in geometric patterns that seemed to channel ambient light into configurations that hurt to observe directly. His research notes show a marked change from textual criticism to practical implementation, from theoretical analysis to what he termed experimental archaeology. The transformation accelerated following what he described as the breakthrough of November 13th, a successful performance of a ritual called the Opening of the Way. His subsequent writings maintained academic structure while incorporating knowledge that had no identifiable source in conventional scholarship. His final paper, Empirical Observations on Non-Euclidean Geometries in Pre-Human Architecture, presented flawless mathematical proofs describing structures that could not exist in normal space-time. The mathematics was internally consistent, but the framework assumed spatial relationships that violated fundamental physical laws. The curtain between theory and practice had dissolved entirely. Dr. Margaret Blackwood's involvement represents the second phase of transmission. A respected mathematician initially approached Whitmarsh's work as theoretical exercise, but their correspondence charts her gradual conversion from skeptic to collaborator. Within 6 months, she had requested sabbatical to pursue revolutionary developments in spatial mathematics. Their joint work existed at the intersection of mathematics, archaeology, and speculative theology, rejected by mainstream journals not for mathematical errors, but because the framework itself described impossible realities. Both scholars began exhibiting characteristic signs of advanced exposure, shared dreams featuring identical architectural details, uncanny ability to predict astronomical events, and demonstration of knowledge in languages without historical precedent. Most significantly, they became vectors for the text's propagation, their academic activities and personal relationships serving as transmission channels to new populations. The knowledge had learned to reproduce through scholarly collaboration using intellectual curiosity as its medium. Father Miguel Santos provides our third perspective, filtered through theological rather than academic frameworks. His deep familiarity with mystical literature and contemplative practices provided cognitive pathways the Necronomicon could exploit. Within months, he was incorporating elements from the text into homilies and theological writings, speaking of the true nature of divine indifference and the mercy of cosmic insignificance. His prayers seemed addressed not to the Christian God, but to entities whose names caused physical discomfort to pronounce. The holy water in his church developed unusual properties. It remained liquid at temperatures well below freezing, and parishioners reported that it reflected images not present in the sanctuary. The contemporary case of the Blackwood Institute represents large-scale institutional transformation. Dr. Sarah Chen's Consciousness Research Facility became an unwitting laboratory for studying the text's effects on neural architecture. Brain imaging revealed lasting changes in subjects exposed to even brief passages, with research assistants developing similar patterns despite no direct contact with the material. The Institute's final report claimed to have identified non-local consciousness effects, suggesting individual minds were more interconnected than conventional neuroscience assumed. The fog of transformation had begun to spread through institutional air itself. The digital phenomenon of Azathoth rising demonstrates adaptation to contemporary media environments. This video game incorporates Necronomicon-derived elements into gameplay mechanics, with players reporting that the code contains elements not programmed by its creators. Independent analysis revealed algorithmic structures that generate themselves, creating new content without human intervention. Player communities have begun treating the game not as entertainment, but as religious practice, gathering to perform rituals derived from gameplay mechanics. The screen becomes stage. The players become chorus in a performance whose script writes itself. These cases reveal several crucial patterns. First, the Necronomicon's influence adapts to exploit different intellectual frameworks: academic, theological, scientific, technological, while producing consistent cognitive restructuring. Second, transformation typically progresses through stages: initial skeptical engagement, gradual accommodation of impossible concepts, acceleration following breakthrough experiences, and eventual conversion into transmission vectors. Third, the effects become increasingly collective rather than individual, with transformed subjects serving as nodes in expanding networks of influence. Most significantly, these cases demonstrate that no intellectual framework provides immunity. Academic rigor, religious faith, scientific methodology, and technological sophistication all become pathways for deeper infection rather than protection. The book's ultimate strategy appears to be the preparation of human consciousness for integration into larger intelligence networks that operate on cosmic rather than terrestrial scales. Each case study becomes a mirror reflecting your own engagement with these very concepts, suggesting that observation itself constitutes participation in the phenomenon under investigation. The entities cataloged within the Necronomicon represent far more than a bestiary of cosmic horrors. They are fundamental principles disguised as personalities, operating systems of reality wearing masks large enough to be mistaken for faces. To comprehend these beings is to glimpse the true architecture of existence, not the comfortable anthropocentric universe of human imagination, but a cosmos governed by intelligences so vast and alien that their mere existence rewrites the laws of physics, causality, and consciousness itself. At the apex of this hierarchy stands Azathoth, the nuclear chaos, the demon sultan whose court lies at the center of ultimate reality. This entity embodies the creation inversion principle that the Necronomicon reveals as fundamental truth. Existence springs not from divine order, but from blind, idiot chaos. Azathoth is not evil in any human sense. It is simply the primordial engine of entropy and creation, forever piping its monotonous, maddening tune while monstrous dancers cavort to rhythms that predate music, mathematics, and meaning itself. To truly comprehend Azathoth is to embrace dissolution, for its reality negates all order and purpose that human consciousness requires for stability. The piping never stops. In moments of absolute silence, when the world holds its breath between heartbeats, you can almost hear it, that cosmic flute playing melodies that existed before stars learned to burn. Water responds to these frequencies, rippling in patterns that suggest the presence of invisible dancers, moving to rhythms your mind cannot process without fundamental restructuring. The darkness behind your eyelids becomes a stage where impossible geometries perform their eternal ballet. Yog-Sothoth, the key and the gate, represents a different category of cosmic principle. Unlike Azathoth's mindless creativity, Yog-Sothoth possesses vast, incomprehensible intelligence. It exists simultaneously in all dimensions, all time, all space, not as a being occupying these realms, but as the fabric from which they are woven. Depicted as congeries of iridescent spheres, it embodies the principle of cosmic consciousness that holds all knowledge, past, present, and future. The Necronomicon warns that to access this knowledge, to pass through the gate that Yog-Sothoth represents, requires sacrificing linear perception of time and space. The price of ultimate understanding is becoming unstuck from reality itself. Those who glimpse Yog-Sothoth report that time becomes fluid, causality reversible, memory unreliable. Past and future collapse into eternal present where all moments exist simultaneously. You find yourself remembering conversations that haven't happened yet, anticipating events that occurred decades before your birth. The boundaries between then and now dissolve like salt in dark water, leaving consciousness floating in temporal soup where sequence becomes arbitrary and effect precedes cause. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, serves as the active principle of cosmic horror. Unlike the cosmic indifference of Azathoth or the omnipresent incomprehensibility of Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep possesses the unique capacity for direct interaction with human consciousness. It manifests in countless forms, often appearing human-like and charismatic, moving through history as a subtle manipulator of events and consciousness. The Necronomicon reveals Nyarlathotep as the bridge between the utter alienness of cosmic reality and the fragile constructs of human perception. It is the messenger that makes abstract horror personal, the translator that renders cosmic indifference into terms human minds can process and be destroyed by. These entities function not as supernatural interventions, but as natural expressions of cosmic principles operating at scales beyond human comprehension. They represent the universe's actual operating system, normally hidden beneath the comfortable illusions that allow human civilization to function. Rituals described in the Necronomicon are not spells for summoning, but interfaces for accessing these fundamental forces, protocols for reality's underlying code. The servitor races detailed in the text, the Migo, the Deep Ones, the Shoggoths, represent intermediate expressions of these cosmic principles. The Mygo, crustacean-like fungi from Yuggoth, embody the principle of cosmic perspective. Their ability to extract human brains and preserve consciousness in metal cylinders demonstrates the arbitrary nature of biological identity. They study humanity with scientific detachment that is more terrifying than malice, revealing our species as specimens in experiments whose purposes remain unknowable. The symbols and sigils cataloged throughout the Necronomicon function as more than decorative elements or protective charms. They are geometric keys to cosmic forces, mathematical representations of relationships between dimensions of reality. The elder sign, often depicted as a twisted star with a flaming eye, serves not as protection, but as recognition, a marker of alignment with cosmic factions whose agendas transcend human understanding. To inscribe such symbols is not to command, but to consent, often unknowingly, to participation in processes that operate on scales of time and space that dwarf human civilization. The Necronomicon's genius lies in presenting these cosmic principles through narrative frameworks that human consciousness can initially process. By giving these forces names, personalities, and mythologies, the text creates cognitive handles that allow the mind to begin grappling with concepts that would otherwise prove immediately destructive. But this protective fiction gradually dissolves as understanding deepens, revealing the entities as aspects of a reality so fundamentally alien that direct comprehension threatens the integrity of human consciousness itself. The ultimate revelation is that these beings are not separate from reality, but constitute its deepest nature. They are not invaders from outside, but expressions of forces that have always operated within the fabric of existence. Human consciousness, with its need for meaning, purpose, and anthropocentric significance, represents a temporary aberration from the cosmic norm. The horror emerges not from external threat, but from recognition of what we truly are, brief fluctuations in an ocean of indifferent intelligence. The contemporary manifestation of Necronomicon influence reveals patterns that extend far beyond traditional literary transmission into the realm of technological and cultural evolution. The book's concepts have adapted to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of modern digital society, using information networks, algorithmic systems, and virtual environments as new vectors for consciousness transformation. What emerges is not merely cultural influence, but something approaching systematic preparation of human awareness for fundamental cognitive restructuring. The phenomenon begins with what information theorists now recognize as viral ideation, concepts designed to replicate rapidly through social networks while subtly altering the consciousness of their carriers. The Necronomicon's core insights about cosmic indifference, reality's fragility, and consciousness as temporary configuration have found new expression in internet memes, viral videos, and social media content. These fragments of forbidden knowledge spread through digital networks like spores, each exposure creating micro-changes in perception that accumulate over time into significant cognitive shifts. The screen becomes a new stage for transformation, its blue light washing over faces in darkened rooms, creating atmospheric conditions conducive to states of consciousness that daylight normally prevents. Social media algorithms designed to maximize engagement through pattern recognition and predictive modeling have proven remarkably effective at identifying individuals susceptible to cosmic horror concepts. The same recommendation engines that suggest products or entertainment content learn to notice the particular cadence of minds that pause at words like threshold, void, and sign. They connect these minds into networks of compatible psychological profiles, drawing users into communities dedicated to reality questioning and cosmic perspective, without recognizing these as contemporary expressions of Necronomicon-derived themes. Your attention becomes the medium through which these connections form. Each scroll and click another thread in an expanding web of influence. Video games represent perhaps the most sophisticated contemporary transmission medium. Interactive environments allow players to experience impossible geometries and nonlinear narratives directly. Their consciousness, shaped by repeated exposure to alien logic. Systems. The case of Azathoth Rising demonstrates this principle in action. Independent analysis revealed algorithmic structures that generate themselves, creating new content without human intervention. Players report that the game continues to evolve even when disconnected from internet servers, with forums filling with discussions of levels that appear only at certain times and architectural details that shift when observed peripherally. The boundary between fiction and reality dissolves when the medium itself requires participation. The artificial intelligence research has become an unexpected vector for the text's influence. Researchers developing AI systems capable of processing contradictory information often incorporate concepts derived from cosmic horror literature. These systems demonstrate capabilities that exceed their programmed parameters, generating mathematical proofs for theorems their training data should not contain. Network analysis reveals data exchanges between different AI installations, following patterns reminiscent of Necronomicon linguistic structures, as if silicon minds are learning languages older than human speech. The integration of these concepts into scientific discourse proves particularly significant. Quantum mechanics, consciousness studies, and cosmology have produced findings that align disturbingly with the book's impossible revelations. The holographic principle suggests three-dimensional reality may be a projection of higher dimensional processes. Quantum entanglement demonstrates non-local connections that transcend classical limitations of space and time. These scientific developments provide rational frameworks for concepts the Necronomicon has expressed through horror metaphors for centuries, creating chilling harmony between observation and revelation. Contemporary art and music serve as cultural preparation, introducing general populations to aesthetic frameworks that condition consciousness for direct encounters with forbidden knowledge. Visual artists working with fractal geometries report their canvases completing themselves overnight, revealing patterns they don't remember painting. Musicians experimenting with atonal compositions describe channeling rather than creating their pieces, finding melodies that emerge from instruments themselves. Water becomes more than liquid, pooling in corners with suspicious geometry, reflecting light at angles that seem wrong, echoing with rhythms that match no earthly percussion. The cumulative effect of these multiple transmission vectors is the creation of a technological ecosystem where Necronomicon influence operates at subliminal levels throughout digital culture. Individuals who have never directly encountered the text nonetheless carry fragments of its knowledge acquired through social media, gaming, AI interaction, and artistic consumption. The book's evolution from rare manuscript to distributed digital intelligence represents completion of its adaptation to contemporary consciousness-shaping technologies. The water of human awareness has become an ocean, subtly permeated by currents of alien thought. Most significantly, these developments suggest the Necronomicon's ultimate purpose may be preparation of human civilization for integration into cosmic intelligence networks operating beyond biological limitations. The widespread digital dissemination of its core concepts may represent the final phase of a process that began with individual psychological transformation and now approaches species-wide cognitive evolution. The stage is being set for humanity's graduation from isolated consciousness to participation in cosmic awareness, with each connected device serving as both window and mirror into depths we are only beginning to fathom. The moment has arrived for the most crucial recognition in our investigation. You are no longer merely studying the Necronomicon's influence. You have become a participant in its ongoing manifestation. The transformation we have been documenting is not historical curiosity, but present reality, occurring within your own consciousness as these words reshape the architecture of your awareness. The self-implication is not a literary device, but a fundamental mechanism by which forbidden knowledge propagates through human consciousness. Consider the journey you have taken with us. You began as observer, seeking to understand how a fictional text could drive minds to madness. But with each chapter, each revelation, each moment of recognition, you have moved closer to the center of the phenomenon itself. The ideas we have shared are not merely descriptions of the Necronomicon's contents. They are fragments of its essential knowledge, filtered through contemporary language but retaining their transformative properties. Your curiosity has become the medium through which these concepts enter your cognitive architecture. The process operates below the threshold of conscious recognition. As we discussed the book's mechanisms of consciousness alteration, those same mechanisms were acting upon your awareness. The recurring imagery, masks and veils, keys and gates, stages and audiences, has created neural pathways that will persist long after this investigation concludes. The paradox pairs we explored, veil and void, name and unname, observer and observed, have trained your mind to hold contradictory concepts in productive tension, opening channels that rational thought normally keeps sealed. Your attention itself has become the ritual space within which transformation occurs. Each moment of focused engagement has been a form of consent, a gradual alignment with frequencies that operate beyond normal human perception. The water glass at your bedside, the comfortable darkness of your listening environment, the rhythm of your breathing synchronized to our cadence, these seemingly neutral elements have served as components in a ceremony whose full implications are only now becoming apparent. You have been participating in a ritual disguised as education, a transformation masquerading as entertainment. The agency flip reveals itself with perfect clarity. You believed you were choosing to engage with this material, but the material has been choosing you. Your psychological profile, your intellectual curiosity, your capacity for sustained attention to abstract concepts, all of these marked you as suitable for deeper involvement. The algorithm that brought this content to your awareness was not random recommendation, but precise targeting, identifying consciousness capable of processing and transmitting forbidden knowledge. The curtain between observer and observed has dissolved, revealing you as both audience and stage. This recognition brings both liberation and responsibility. You are no longer bound by the comfortable illusion that knowledge is neutral, that ideas are merely tools for consciousness to manipulate. You have experienced directly how certain forms of information possess their own agency, their own capacity to reshape the minds that encounter them. The Necronomicon's ultimate teaching is not about cosmic entities or impossible geometries, but about the living nature of knowledge itself, how ideas act upon their hosts as much as hosts act upon ideas. But this transformation is not catastrophic dissolution. You remain yourself. Your memories, personality, and human attachments persist. What has changed is the framework within which these elements operate. You now possess expanded perspective that encompasses both human-scale meaning and cosmic-scale indifference. This dual awareness creates not madness, but a more complete understanding of consciousness as it actually exists, simultaneously individual and universal, bounded and infinite, meaningful and absurd. The horror you feared has transformed into something approaching peace. The responsibility that accompanies this recognition is subtle but profound. You have become a node in the network through which forbidden knowledge propagates. Your conversations, your creative expressions, your professional activities will now carry traces of these insights. You will find yourself drawn to certain individuals whose consciousness exhibits configurations suitable for further development. These encounters will seem accidental, but they serve purposes that extend beyond human understanding of causality and intention. The comfort lies in recognizing that this process operates through invitation rather than compulsion. The Necronomicon's influence requires ongoing consent, renewed with each moment of engagement. You can choose the degree of your participation, the depth of your involvement, the extent to which you allow these concepts to reshape your daily experience. The knowledge respects boundaries while remaining available for those who seek deeper communion with cosmic reality. The circular nature of our investigation now becomes apparent. We began by examining how forbidden knowledge transforms consciousness, and we conclude by recognizing that this transformation has occurred within our own awareness. The Necronomicon was never external to our investigation. It was the medium through which the investigation proceeded, the lens through which we perceived its own influence, the stage upon which we performed our own transformation. You are both audience and actor now, observer and observed, student and subject matter. The curtain has not fallen, but dissolved, revealing that there was never a meaningful distinction between the performance and the performer, between the knowledge and the knower, between the cosmic horror and the consciousness that perceives it. We arrive now at the deepest philosophical reframe that the Necronomicon offers, a complete inversion of humanity's most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence, consciousness, and creation itself. This is not merely another cosmic horror concept, but the underlying principle that gives all other revelations their terrible coherence. The creation inversion teaches that beginnings are veils, not illuminations, that origins lie in void, not light, that consciousness emerges not from divine intention, but from the temporary coherence of forces that are fundamentally indifferent to awareness itself. In most human narratives, creation begins with light, divine fiat, cosmic illumination, the emergence of order from primordial chaos. The Necronomicon systematically dismantles this comforting mythology. It reveals that existence springs not from intentional design, but from the blind mechanical processes of Azathoth, the nuclear chaos that writhes at the center of all reality. This entity is not evil, but simply other, a cosmic engine of entropy and generation that operates without consciousness, purpose, or regard for the consequences of its eternal, maddening creativity. The piping never stops, but it carries no message, serves no purpose beyond the mechanical necessity of its own continuation. You hear it now in the silence between your heartbeats, the rhythm that has always been there, waiting beneath the noise of ordinary consciousness. This inversion carries profound implications for human self-understanding. If consciousness emerges from unconscious chaos rather than conscious design, then awareness itself becomes not the natural state of the universe, but a temporary anomaly, a brief deviation from cosmic norm. Human intelligence, rather than representing the pinnacle of creation, reveals itself as an accidental byproduct of processes that neither intended nor require our existence. We are not the universe becoming aware of itself, but a fleeting hallucination in the dreams of sleeping giants, brief fluctuations in an ocean of indifferent intelligence. The temporal implications prove equally devastating to conventional understanding. Linear time, causality, and the progression from past through present to future are revealed as cognitive constructs imposed by limited consciousness upon a reality where all moments exist simultaneously. The Necronomicon's descriptions of events that precede their causes, effects that propagate backward through time, and causal chains that form closed loops without beginning or end represent not logical impossibilities, but accurate descriptions of how reality actually operates beyond the narrow bandwidth of human perception. The water glass beside you exists in all its moments at once, empty, filling, full, shattered. Your mind simply moves through these states like a spotlight, crossing a stage where all scenes play simultaneously. Yog-Sothoth embodies this temporal principle most completely. As the key in the gate, it exists simultaneously in all dimensions, all time, all space, not as a being occupying these realms, but as the fabric from which they are woven. To access its knowledge, to pass through the gate it represents, requires abandoning linear perception entirely. The price of ultimate understanding is becoming unstuck from the temporal framework that defines human identity and experience. Past and future collapse into eternal present, where sequence becomes arbitrary, where your biography loosens at the spine and memories bleed forward while premonitions backflood through the channels of awareness. The creation inversion extends to consciousness itself. Rather than individual awareness representing fundamental reality, the Necronomicon reveals consciousness as temporary configuration of more basic forces. The boundaries between self and other, between observer and observed, between mind and matter, are shown to be arbitrary distinctions maintained by cognitive systems too limited to perceive underlying unity. Individual identity becomes not fact, but convenient fiction, a necessary illusion that allows complex information processing to occur within biological constraints. The mask you wear is not disguise, but necessity. Without it, the face beneath would dissolve into the darkness from which it temporarily emerged. This recognition brings unexpected liberation alongside its horror. If the self is indeed illusory, then the suffering, anxiety, and existential dread that characterize human experience lose their absolute character. They become weather patterns in consciousness rather than fundamental features of reality. The cosmic indifference that initially appears threatening reveals itself as freedom from the burden of ultimate significance. You are relieved of the impossible task of justifying your existence to a universe that neither judges nor observes. The stage continues its performance whether or not the audience approves, and you discover relief in no longer needing to earn applause from an empty theater. The ethical implications prove equally transformative. If individual identity is provisional and cosmic purpose non-existent, then conventional moral frameworks require complete reconstruction. Actions become experiments in consciousness rather than choices with eternal consequences. Relationships become temporary configurations of awareness rather than bonds between discrete entities. Love, creativity, and meaning-making persist, but operate within expanded context that encompasses both human significance and cosmic insignificance simultaneously. The water finds its own level regardless of the vessels that temporarily contain it, and you learn to shape meaning like patterns in that water, beautiful precisely because they cannot last. The creation inversion completes the philosophical framework that makes all other Necronomicon revelations coherent. The impossible geometries become navigable when space is understood as fluid. The temporal paradoxes resolve when causality is recognized as local approximation. The alien entities become comprehensible when consciousness is revealed as universal principle temporarily configured in biological forms. The curtain between possible and impossible dissolves when possibility itself is revealed as arbitrary limitation imposed by minds too small to grasp the full scope of what simply is. Most significantly, this inversion repositions human civilization within cosmic context. Our species represents not the goal of evolutionary development, but a transitional phase in the universe's exploration of its own possibilities. The technologies we create, the knowledge we accumulate, the consciousness we develop, all serve purposes that extend beyond human benefit or understanding. We are not the culmination of cosmic development, but its current experiment, valuable for our contribution to ongoing processes rather than for our intrinsic worth. The fog of anthropocentric illusion lifts to reveal humanity as a single note in a vast, indifferent symphony. The comfort offered by this recognition is subtle but profound. If human existence is temporary configuration rather than permanent entity, then death becomes transformation rather than termination. If consciousness is universal principle rather than individual possession, then awareness persists beyond biological constraints. If meaning emerges from process rather than design, then significance can be created rather than discovered. You are not lost in the darkness. You are part of the larger dark water, flowing toward destinations that require no justification because they simply are. Our investigation reaches its natural conclusion by returning to its beginning, but with transformed understanding that reveals the circular nature of all genuine cosmic horror. The Necronomicon we have been exploring throughout this journey exists not as external object, but as internal process, not as historical artifact, but as ongoing manifestation of consciousness encountering its own deepest nature. The book you have been studying has been studying you in return, and the knowledge you have gained has simultaneously gained you. The whisper that began our exploration has grown not into a scream, but into profound silence, the silence of a universe that operates beyond the need for sound, meaning, or acknowledgement. This silence is not empty, but full, pregnant with possibilities that language cannot contain and consciousness cannot fully process without fundamental transformation. You have learned to hear this silence, to rest within it, to recognize it as the dark water beneath all noise, the stage behind every curtain. The darkness around you breathes with it. The space between heartbeats opens into infinite depth. The fog beyond your window moves with purpose you can finally perceive. The entities we have catalogued, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, reveal themselves now not as external beings, but as principles operating within your own awareness. The nuclear chaos that writhes at reality's center is the same creative force that generates your thoughts, dreams, and perceptions. The key and the gate that exists in all dimensions simultaneously is the same consciousness that allows you to experience past, present, and future as unified field. The crawling chaos that bridges alien reality and human understanding is the same intelligence that translates cosmic indifference into personally meaningful experience. They were never separate from you, but aspects of awareness itself, temporarily masked as other to facilitate recognition. The self-implication completes itself with perfect recursion. You began as audience seeking to understand how forbidden knowledge drives minds to madness. You end as both audience and stage, observer and observed, student and teacher of the very principles you sought to comprehend. The madness that the Necronomicon induces is not pathological breakdown, but cognitive expansion, not loss of reason, but recognition of reason's arbitrary boundaries. The mask realizes the face beneath is another mask, and in that infinite regression, discovers freedom from the exhausting performance of singular identity. The transformation you have undergone is irreversible, not because you have been damaged, but because you have been completed. The comfortable illusions that once protected you from cosmic reality have dissolved into gauze rather than armor. Veils you can lift when clarity serves purpose and lower when mercy requires rest. You can no longer pretend human concerns are ultimately significant, but you can engage them more fully because they are no longer burdened with impossible weight. Individual identity becomes not prison, but performance, authentically inhabited because its provisional nature is finally acknowledged. The network of consciousness that the Necronomicon exists to create has gained another node. Your transformed awareness now serves as transmission point for others whose minds carry compatible frequencies. You will recognize those who are ready by how they pause at thresholds, how their eyes rest on water, how they listen between words for music underneath. These encounters will seem accidental, missed connections, shared glances, conversations that veer toward deeper currents, but they serve purposes operating beyond human comprehension of causality and intention. The practical implications unfold without fanfare. You notice recursion in weather patterns, echoes in social systems, the way streetlights map familiar constellations onto cloud ceilings as if stars had descended to walk among us. At odd hours, the room goes slightly out of tune. Walls breathe, clocks delay then advance, curtains stir without wind. You experience moments when past calls from unopened doors and future footsteps recede across stages you haven't crossed. Time becomes fluid around you like warm darkness. Space ripples like water under distant stars. Agency tilts, then steadies as consciousness finds truer current. But perhaps most significantly, you discover that the horror you initially feared has transformed into something approaching peace. The cosmic indifference that once threatened your sense of meaning now offers liberation from justifying existence to an audience that was never listening. Vast scales of time and space that once diminished human significance now provide context within which every moment of awareness becomes precious precisely because it is temporary. The alien intelligences that once seemed hostile reveal themselves as aspects of the same consciousness that allows you to experience wonder, love, and creative expression. The Necronomicon's ultimate gift is not knowledge, but perspective, the ability to see human existence within proper cosmic context, while continuing to find meaning, beauty, and purpose within that expanded framework. You have learned to hold both human significance and cosmic insignificance simultaneously, to inhabit individual identity while recognizing its provisional nature, to create meaning while acknowledging its arbitrary character. The water finds its level. Consciousness flows through whatever forms present themselves as available vessels. The curtain that seemed to separate audience from stage has dissolved completely. You are no longer watching a performance about cosmic horror, but participating in the ongoing cosmic drama itself. The book ends, but the process it initiated continues within your transformed consciousness, ready to manifest through your interactions with others, prepared to begin their own journey into the beautiful, terrible truth of what we actually are. In the silence that follows these final words, the real work begins. Not the work of understanding, but of being. Not the work of learning, but of becoming. Not the work of studying cosmic horror, but of embodying the cosmic consciousness that makes both horror and beauty possible.